Welcome to the Live Ukulele podcast. My name's Brad Bordessa. Thank you for tuning in. This is one of the first in-person interviews I've done since COVID, except for the episodes that my friend Higgs has been a part of. And I have with me Mr. John Nash from Ukulele-Inspired Studios.
How's it going?
Thanks for coming.
Thanks
for
God.
being here.
Thank you for the invite, man. I am actually up here in the mountains, it feels like, on the Big Island, and this place is beautiful. I tell all of you to come visit Brad, but then he might have
I don't have the space.
Yeah, it might be a laundry list of people just got down his driveway, but yeah, this is a really beautiful place. I got to meet a little pig in the fenced area. I got to meet some cats. Yeah, it's legit. It feels very reviving being up here for sure.
Yeah, we like to get away. So could you give us a little backstory of kind of how you became to be as a teacher and kind of what you do for the most part?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of got into ukulele like 2009 probably. I moved out to Oahu from where I was living in Seattle. Just needed a break from the rain. Ended up spending like 2 years there, 2.5 years, but I actually picked up ukulele there. I remember just going to just a barbecue at somebody's house and like watching these people all play music and just being totally entranced. And I was just like, oh my God, that's so cool. And, like had a beer and then somebody shoved the ukulele in my hand and they're like, no, do this with your hands. I had some guitar background too, but it was just amazing. I was like, oh my God, I'm making music with this thing and other people are singing. So it was like definitely, love at first kind of strum with that instrument. I've been playing music since I was like 16 years old probably, and guitar and bass, kind of self-taught. But when I started playing ukulele, it just made a lot of sense, and just having, the portability, everything like that. So moved back to the mainland and was trying to get out of the trades I was in. I was doing construction at the time and decided to go full tilt into teaching, and was teaching bass and guitar back in the day, but that's not what people wanted to learn, and that's not what I wanted to teach. So, yeah, just started teaching ukulele full time. God, that must have been, back in 2013 or something. And so, just building the studio, the in-person business and stuff like that. And I'm teaching full time now. That's how I make my money and raise my kids and stuff. So, teaching private lessons and group classes. On website Ukulele-Inspired. And I feel like, I've been in the community for a really long time, but again, just sort of this like periphery, you probably know the feeling. It's like, oh, I know who that person is, but we finally get to meet each other. Yeah. I think the first time I reached out to you was I recorded that solo ukulele album. God, what year was that? That must have been...
It's like 2014,
something like that. Yeah. And so I remember just sending you a CD in the mail, and then you wrote a review, which was really cool. But yeah, it's just like, periphery, community, and then of course with COVID, it's just like now we're all just doing our own thing.
Totally.
But yeah, just trying to stay busy, developing content, and teaching, 3 group classes a week, and then private lessons. It's like a full-time schedule, full-ish schedule, I guess. Yeah. You teach, right? You teach private lessons, or?
I'm not currently doing the private lesson thing. I'm starting to look into kind of the in-person private lessons here for kind of, my community, because I feel like for me, being one of very few ukulele players around in the area, that's sort of, my kuleana to be there for the people who want to learn. For sure. But it's just a matter of like, when is that going to be appropriate again?
And where are you planning on doing it? Are you going to do it at your house, or you want to get a space?
That's part of the question. I don't imagine it would be like a full-time studio, so getting a space doesn't make sense. But also I don't necessarily want random people in my house. It's kind of a balancing act, but I'll figure it out as
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I'm actually in the, kind of pivot place right now, trying to decide if I'm going to go back to in-person teaching. Everything's opening up, but I've kept my space down in Denver. I told you I lived kind of up in the mountains a little bit, and held on to my space, paid rent there, was like, wow. Had all the intention of like setting up a full-time video studio with the lights up all the time. I could just walk in and shoot. And of course, didn't get around to it. So I spent most of my energy building out the home studio and home office and teaching everything virtually. Because it's a weird situation to be in, because I've taught online, at least private lessons, almost since when I started teaching, right? And so when this happened, I knew a lot of teachers who didn't know how to pivot, couldn't figure it out. They were like, wait, what? I looked at my phone and teach people. So yeah, I made the pivot pretty quickly. And now I'm kind of like, okay, well, do I even pivot back? Because it's now you don't have to explain to people.
Right. That's a big deal.
Everybody knows that this is how you learn, through the last year. And so you don't got to be like, no, we meet on Skype, or we meet on Google Hangouts, or we meet on Zoom. And it's like, you don't have to explain it to people, because that's how they're doing everything. They're taking their yoga and Pilates and all that stuff via Zoom now too. So it's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it's cool too. It definitely has its pluses and minuses. I think every learning environment does.
And what do you think those are at this point, looking at maybe going back to in-person?
Well, it's funny because it's like the benefits are almost immediately for the student. When it first happened, it's like, oh, they don't have to leave their house. They don't got to put pants on, whatever. But I think for me, there are so many benefits to it in terms of teaching. I think classroom management, as soon as you sort of learn how to do that, it's like people can be muted all the time. You've taught workshops when you wish you had a mute button for the entire room. To say that in the most gentle way, it's more like just to be able to deliver what content, just to keep, your time management under control, all of those things. And if you can put a little money into investing in gear and stuff, like multiple camera angles, things like that, I've definitely found that there's some detail that you can really dive into on the online teaching. I think the biggest thing is just trying to make people feel like it's personalized. I think that's the biggest challenge. You were asking what the pluses are, but there are definitely some challenges. But it's just like anything, it's practice, right?
Right.
My first online class was probably not as good as my last one I taught. So it's been a I think a really great year for the people who have started to teach online, because it's just going to make you a better instructor. It's going to make you a better teacher. It's going to make you a better player, all of those things. So, can I ask you, how long have you been doing the podcasting thing?
Since halfway through COVID.
Yeah. So
kind of late-ish last
5-6
year.
months in. Got you. What was the poll? What was the...
I've always been fascinated with radio. I've been, growing up, I was homeschooled and had the chance to go to a couple of different radio stations, just as that general, I don't know, it was like the personalized work fair, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go check out a radio station. Here's a job opportunity.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I just loved it. I loved hearing my voice in the headphones and with the mic and the whole management of the studio thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I can do that myself.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a fun thing to do. I was super bored, and it felt like I've thought it would be a good idea for a long time.
Yeah.
It's like everybody says, you should start a podcast.
It's really great, man. I've had great work on it. It's super interesting, and I think it, for me anyway, there's a lot of value in it. I definitely have learned a lot of things. Do you want to continue to do it after COVID stuff? And
I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah,
it's a good way for me to kind of keep my mixing chops up slightly. Just adjusting a mic is fairly straightforward, but there's still things to be hearing and practicing. And
keeps your head in it too, right?
Yeah.
It's a certain headspace you need to be in, I think.
Remember how to plug the mic in, kind of a thing.
It goes in this end. Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. That's cool, man. It's I think it's one of those things that I've always thought about on the periphery, but like you and I were talking about earlier, it's when you're in the entrepreneur thing, when you're doing your own stuff, it's you only have a certain amount of capacity, right? You can only learn so many things. That just like your video series you just put out, right? Oh, and I went ahead and bought that video series. If you guys are looking for some ukulele content, learning material, for sure, check out Brad's thing. It's super interesting, really well done. But it's just like that, right? It's you have to learn a whole new set of everything, right?
Yeah, it's no longer just teaching ukulele.
Yeah, it's no longer just teaching ukulele. And I think that to me is one of the most interesting things about a lot of the people I've met in this, community, kind of in this like ukulele journey I've taken on for more than a decade now. It's just the people I meet are just very adventurous, very willing to try new things, and also just super adaptive, right? Like just figuring stuff out. People like, James Hill, what the Ukulele Underground guys are doing, what, Brad's doing. It's just like taking what you have and trying to do it the best way you can. But like, there's just so much more than just teaching, because I think that's the part that's like fun and enjoyable and I get a lot out of it. But it's like, there are so many other things to manage if you want to be successful at it, or if you want to reach more people, right?
Right. So you were talking earlier about improving as a teacher. I noticed on your website you got the little JHUI badge.
Got the badge. I got the pin somewhere. I got it mailed to me, but I don't know what I did with it.
Nice. What was that like? Because I've always watched that from the side, kind of as I worked for James for a while.
Yeah.
I'm doing admin stuff, and so I saw that from the side, and have always heard about it and thought about it, knowing him. What was that like, and how have you moved to take what you learned there and apply it to what you do now, and what has changed, kind of?
Yeah. Well, the experience was really great. I mean, it's sort of like 3 consistent years of really, you can look at it like professional development, right? There are so many fields where people will go to conferences and they'll take classes and stuff my wife's a naturopathic doctor. She's always going to conferences and things. And so, that type of development I think is so important, because it's really easy to get stagnant, right? Like just get in the same thing and you're teaching the same thing over and over again. Your perspective stays really narrow and really rigid. So yeah, the professional development thing for me, I think really as soon as I stopped teaching the other instruments and like decided to open a space, because in the beginning I was like driving to people's houses. So glad I'm not doing that anymore. As soon as I got a dedicated space, I was just like, well, if this is what I'm choosing to do for a career, there's got to be ways to learn, right? I think as a teacher, that's the thing that if you can not lose sight of it, I think it's the thing that's going to keep you growing as a teacher. If you can remember that, you need to learn as well, right? You need to educate yourself. There's so many different ways to do things, and there's so many people out there that are doing it better than you, or in a different way than you are. And so if you can incorporate a lot of that stuff, I think your development always keeps moving forward, which is really good. Anyway, so that professional development thing has been a big kick for me. I went out to like an event Kimo Hussey did, like in some Canadian island somewhere that I'd take like 4 ferries to. Super wild. I spent a week out there with him. But I was just in this phase of just like wanting to meet other people who are teaching full time. And who were just like entrenched in ukulele. So I found James Hill's JHUI program online and just said, why not? I think at that point it was like pretty hard financially. Like, I don't know if I can do this. I got to buy a plane ticket. I got to take time away from family and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of things that you got to give up to go and do it. But, it was super important to me. And it was just really, I think it's a really great program in terms of if you don't have any concepts about, some of the things that are like fundamental to education, right? Like things like learning about sequencing and learning about, how to teach, and then to have it be ukulele specific. It's pretty unique, right? There's not a ton of programs, not even a ton. There's maybe just his. There's not a lot of programs out there that are structured and, that you can really attend and learn about teaching. So it was super beneficial. I think more than anything, I really learned about, I think, pacing. Pacing was probably the biggest takeaway I got from it. I think that in the beginning, and I'm sure every teacher kind of goes, maybe you have the same, had the same feelings, but I remember right at the outset, it was just like, if I look back at myself back in those days, I'm like, whoa, dude, like, slow down, man. How many things are you going to talk about today? You got 40 minutes with people And, I try to keep it in mind. It's like, everybody has a certain capacity, and it's like teach one or two things, teach them really well, make sure everybody's got it nailed down. So a lot about pacing, a lot about sequencing, and also just being around teachers, just being around teachers. It can sometimes feel a little bit lonely, like running your own studio. Totally. And it's just like find myself talking at the very end of my classes to my students, and I'm like, this is like lunchroom talk with teachers. This is not what I should be talking to my students about, but it's just like I don't have other people to talk to, like, what did you think about what I did at this end of this composition? It's just like, how about that turn? And it's just one of those things. It's like it's hard to find people that you can really connect with and talk about those things. So that was super valuable, in the JHUI program. It's just you're just around all teachers and all ukulele teachers at that. So it's like you all have that in common and can nerd out about it, which was really cool. Just something, kind of keeping you on track. I think the one thing that was a struggle for me, of course, right around that time, my wife and I decided to get pregnant, have a kid. It was just really hard to do stuff remote. But yeah, it definitely changed me as a teacher. It affects the way, if you walk into a classroom with me today, it's like, it's definitely, it's shaped a lot of the way I, manage education these days for sure. So you never participated in the program, but you have been working with James, so you know about it. And
I know about it. Of the material. Have you ever
did like desire or want to check it out? Or
I thought about it for a while. I had the chance to kind of work in person with James at the Kahamoku Ohana workshop down in Pahala here on Big Island, and he was big time mentor for me, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And I asked him straight up at one point, and it's like, do you think I should do JHUI? Mm-hmm. And he was like, if you don't, you'll figure it out yourself. Basically told me straight up, is like, if you seem like the kind of person who is gonna do it either way.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you can do it yourself, that's cool too. You're gonna find your own ways that are independent of my ways of, or the structured curriculum that I'm presenting to that program.
What we've developed for that program. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting too, because I'm sure at that point you were like kind of in a different spot, right? Like
totally.
You were maybe at the beginning of that journey of figuring it out. It might be interesting to like go to it a little bit later.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to like, go back to some of that material. And for me, I think one of the best parts, especially in year 3, was interacting with people that were kind of like, oh, what am I like? What am I doing? Is this literally a bunch of, ukulele teachers in a room together? That sort of feeling of being like, oh, I'm not the only person who's like into this in the same way. It was just like kind of a cool feeling, sort of almost seeing that like starry-eyed look, just kind of like, I don't know what's going on yet. So yeah, I would love to sort of at least be in that environment again of sort of experiencing it now that I've had, a decade or so under my belt of teaching. You're just a different person,
Right.
It's like meeting a musician who's like at the very start of their thing, and then you meet them like, 5 or 6 years later, and they've been gigging or they've been touring, and it's like, whoa, you're in a different spot, right? You're like a totally different person. So yeah, I don't know. I would say if you ever had a desire, it would be something worth checking out. And now you can do it all virtually too, right? Like you just finished that whole thing.
Yeah.
I haven't dipped my toes back into it yet, but I kind of want to, just to check out some more video content. And
I think for me, the interesting thing would be the social dynamics and the actual in classroom mechanics of managing people. And because what I've picked up from James over the years is like, the keep the beat going kinds of things as you're teaching.
For sure.
And I don't know if that's something that would be quite as easy to pick up virtually, and you wouldn't necessarily get the chance to see it in action or practice it with a dynamic room of people who are like, oh, where's the beat?
I completely hear what you're saying. I've watched a couple of the sample videos, and the one thing I would say is that for me, I think that I'd find some value in it because I have experience teaching. Like you've been in a workshop setting. There are a lot of people who are getting into that program in year 1, and they might have taught like 1 private lesson, 3 private lessons,
right.
And they're sort of like, I think I want to teach, It's a totally different situation. If you've never taught a workshop, then watching a video of, somebody who has a lot more experience like James Hill teaching a workshop, you might not get as much value out of it. But for me, it's like, watching it, I'm sure I could pick up a lot of things, a lot of, oh, that was a nice, the language they chose that he chose there or whatever. And just watching the reaction too of students, I think that's, because you get that sort of like student feedback in those situations in that program, because you're like in the student's shoes for most of it, which is a sort of different experience already, but then getting to see an experienced teacher sort of like run the room that way. There's definitely a lot of moments that, you're seeing things and just being like, oh, okay, now I get the reasons you would do it that way, or the reasons you would, and like when he can sense that like the room's starting to get away from him, and like what are the tactics to get it back and all of that stuff, because it's, it's just like, for me, teaching is one of the most interesting art forms, I call it art form, jobs, whatever, crafts, I guess. Yeah,
I think it's a craft.
It's, one of the most interesting crafts, because it's like, it's really performance, but you are almost trying to get buy-in in a different way. You're not trying to get people to, when you're performing music, you're trying to get them to like totally lose, like just vibe out. Like you almost don't want them thinking, right? And then, when you're teaching, it's performance, but you're like, no, you need to think, like be very logical and understand the words that are coming out of my mouth and all that stuff. It's just, it's a total, but there are so many performance elements to it, right? Like you have to keep things moving. You gotta, not a lot of breaks in between, like you're doing a lot of check-ins and things. So yeah, it's super interesting for sure. And again, like, being able to sit across from somebody who knows what I'm talking about is kind of a cool experience too, because there's not a lot of people to talk to about that stuff, For
sure. It's a completely different group of homies.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you want to play something?
Yeah.
Kick off the music?
I think we should jam something. I was going to see, since this is your first in person, if Brad was going to jump on the uke too as well.
I can do that.
Yeah, we can play a little bit. So I didn't really have any ideas about anything to play, but you want to drop tune since we were doing it, since we were talking about it? Yeah, we'll do one original and then.
I actually had to tune up for Sunday. I had one of my first gigs out with
congrats
with someone else.
Nice.
And of course,
and your ukulele was like, what are you doing?
Got to tune it to something recognizable.
Yeah, totally.
But definitely this half down thing is,
it's nice, right?
It's great, especially for singing.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, I would play probably like this full time if it wasn't for other people. Like just playing with other people is the only reason I usually tune it up. It's whack. Have you ever tried? This is just going to be the little giveaway. I was telling you before, I want to be the guy who's like, oh, sound slice. That's what he does or whatever. Same thing with this tuning. Try tuning up all the other strings all the way up and then leave the C string at a B. Just try it and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's a good one. So major 7 kind of thing?
It's not major 7.
Or no.
It's minor. It's an E minor. It's an E minor, right? It's like the B. It's like almost like a power chord. The craziest part, did you listen to any of that stuff that I sent over to you? Yeah. One of those tunes, I mess around with that tuning. But it's crazy because it's almost like dark tuning.
Mm-hmm. It sounded pretty dark.
It flips.
The whole vibe.
It flips, and then like you hit the open chord, and it's super wild. It's like, oh my god. So yeah, mess around with it. It's really cool, man. It's almost like drop D tuning for like a guitar, right? Like you've like a lot of the metal players, they just drop D, and it's kind of the same thing. So drop C, just drop it down to a B. It's pretty cool.
So tell me the story of this ukulele and why you've got to take it back to.
This ukulele here is one that I got custom built from Joe Souza over at Kanilea, which is awesome. They were nice enough to give me artist sponsorship over there, which is really, really cool to be a part of their family. This is one that I built, I want to say in 2016, maybe. But yeah, it's a friend of mine, a luthier friend of mine, who's been hauling wood around, not building guitars out of it, but just seasoning it, I guess, for me. Just went in, and I was like taking guitar cutoffs. Like I was taking off like off-width stuff that was just not usable in a guitar building world, and found some really, I found some Pernambuco. Like, have you ever seen that wood? It's like orange. It is so cool looking. Anyway, this piece was like Honduran rosewood. I just fell in love with the colors. It was super, super purple back in the day. And then the top is Port Orford cedar. And yeah, they gave me a little side sound port, I think, even before they knew how to do side sound ports. And I just love the big chunky headstock, and then wanted the upgraded tuners until I saw the price tag. Then I didn't want them anymore. It's amazing to me how much tuners are. It's like, especially these, it's like half plastic. I don't get it.
Yeah. It's super worth it though when they don't work, because
well, it was
bad tuners are bad.
Well, I told you this thing is basically in the coffin for the last year and a half because one of the bracing popped. When did it happen? I was at Denver Uke Fest. I was like teaching a workshop before I was playing that night with I play in a trio called the Council with a banjo player and an upright bassist. Anyway, we're performing. This is a fairly big gig for us. It's like 300 people, probably something like that. And like literally like 4 hours before, it just starts making the worst vibrating you've ever heard, just buzzing. And I'm like in the middle of a workshop, kind of freaking out, totally lost my train of thought. I was like, I think I have to stop teaching this workshop halfway, like going over it in my own head. We were just talking about that sort of classroom management. I mean, this was basically like a bomb went off in the middle of the classroom. Like, I'm like, what do I do? So I pretty much stopped the workshop almost dead in its tracks, maybe talked for like 10 or 15 minutes more. And then I just got out of there and I like went to the only luthier in Denver and said, can you fix this? And he's like, I'm not touching that thing. And I'm like, you have to fix it now. So yeah, the bracing came loose. I had to borrow, one of my students had a super nice like Blackbird there. And so I only pickup I could find, pretty much. And it was super awesome. He let me do it. We had a great gig, but yeah, this is the second, and I sent it out to Hawaii and got it fixed. And then, yeah, about 6 months later, that buzz started up again. What was crazy is it's been sitting a year and a half, and I took it out, and I'm like, oh, is that buzz gone? I think that buzz is gone, but it's still there. I got to drive it really, really hard, but you can hear that little rattle, and then when you push on the top of it, it goes away. So, yeah, we'll see what they do with it. I don't know. I'm like, I know that, I mean, like, how many times have you taken one of your instruments in it? That's a Chuck Moore. Never. Really?
Yeah, I mean, the Kamaka, the frets are shot, but that's nothing to do with the build. Yeah. I've been lucky. I've seen so many just like self-destruct in the humidity.
Yeah, well, I also think like, these are built here too. There's something about taking them away from their homeland. Yeah. Humidity is awful in Colorado, and the temperature swings too. So it's like, that's supposedly the worst. It's, it can deal with humidity changes pretty well. It can deal with temperature changes pretty well. But when you do them both at the same time, like a big temperature shift and a big humidity shift, that's when you really see wood change shape. And so, yeah, maybe it's just, it longs to be home. Maybe it just needs to be here for a week and it'll just start
suck up some moisture.
Yeah, totally. The brace
stop buzzing.
Just reattaches itself, which would be cool. All right, let's give this a try. 2, 3, 4. How much farther will I roam? sound fills a space, feels hollow in my bones. I've been waiting for sunrise, I've been waiting a long time to see the way home. Go ahead. You showed the way, patient like you are. And sometimes you're not, but I like that best of all. And my heart is whole, it's filled with all you've got. If I fill this role, will you be the things I'm not? I've been waiting for sunrise, I've been waiting a long time to see the way home. I've been waiting for sunrise, I've been waiting a long time to see the way home. And all around you feel the sound as I recall you were the cause. I've been waiting up all night without any starlight. I've been waiting for sunrise, waiting a long time. And all around you feel the sound as I recall you were the cause. My heart is whole, it feeds the soul. And all around you feel the sound. I've been waiting up all night without any starlight. I've been waiting for sunrise, I've been waiting a long time. I've been waiting up all night, waiting for sunrise to see the way home. It was a little bit better take too.
Sweet. Is that one of the council songs?
You know, that band is kind of funny. It's almost like in COVID, we kind of really became a band because I think, you know, that story I was telling about Denver Uke Fest, it was kind of almost like a hodgepodge. It was like 3 of my songs, 4 of my songs, and then 3 of the banjo player's songs, and like 2 of the bassist songs. So it was almost a, what's that called when you collage or something? Yeah, it's like it was more like a collage at that point. But I think right before one of the last gigs we played, then we got, you know, a couple of sit-ins with a little more frequent practice, and it was like that sort of kicked it into writing like really what the band sounds like now, you know. And so it took a long time. It was like 2 years, 3 years, and it's pretty crazy because, you know, all of us are really, really busy. That's I think the difference between playing in a band when you're in your teens and your 20s, and like then you do it in your 30s and 40s, and you're an adult and you got family and kids and stuff. It's like, oh no, I don't have all the time in the world. You know, I think the first band I was in, we all lived together. So it's like, what do you want to do? Well, let's play music, you know? So that just doesn't happen nowadays, you know? Now it's more like, okay, I got to carve this out. You know, for a while there, I think after those 2 years, you know, we probably played together 20 times, 18 times, maybe, you know, like maybe even less than that. That's including gigs too. So, you know, gigs we were getting ready for. So yeah, COVID's been pretty crazy because it's like, okay, now we need to learn how to record from home, which, you know, a lot of people know how to do that. Mm-hmm. I think you know how to do that. You know, you've been doing it for a long time. I didn't know how to do that. So, you know, but we've been working with a pretty great audio engineer who's like, you know, kind of holding our hands through the process. Like, nice. Don't send me that file, you know, like kind of, trying to get our game up a little bit.
Well, it sounds fabulous, and it's got really cool vibe. It's very different. Listening to it, there was one song that, like the banjo of all things, was capturing almost like a Koto Asian vibe.
Yeah.
Kind of.
You're talking about, and the name of that tune is Oba-chan, which means grandmother in Japanese. The banjo player is actually one of the most interesting cats I've ever met. You know, I think if you'd talked to me like 5 or 6 years ago and told me that I was going to be in a band with a banjo, I would have been like, no, that's not going to happen. But it did. Super wild, man. I don't know. I think you know this. You move to a place and you start to just sort of absorb the culture, like even if it's subconscious, right? I mean, in Colorado, especially, it's like the mecca for bluegrass music, right? And so every band out there, you know, like you go to a brewery, there's a banjo, there's a mandolin, there's a fiddle, you know, it's like every band has that makeup. And, but he's just an interesting cat. Like, you know, he talks a lot about being in the scene and sort of being like, nope, I'm not going to learn how to play a Scruggs lick. I'm not going to, you know, like the stereotypical banjo sound and the tunes that they want people to play. He's just not about that. He's like transcribing classical pieces and putting on the banjo. And Sweet. he's just a really interesting cat. And I remember the very first time I heard the uke and the banjo together, it was a trip. I was like, whoa, that is, I mean, I love that that's your description, is it's different because that's cool. You know, like I think that's one of the biggest things where I'm like, you know, performing solo with a ukulele is hard. There's not a lot of people in the world that can do it well, you know? And even some of those people, after an hour and a half, it's like, you probably don't want to listen to ukulele anymore.
They're tapped.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you're tapped. And it's like, you know, it's just not a very big and powerful instrument.
Did you sell the band on, hey, why don't you bring in an ukulele? Or
Not at all. Actually, you know, I told you it was more like kind of mosaic, just collage style, you know, like just tunes that I'd written. That one we played, you know, tunes that I'd written, and he would just kind of jump. I mean, to tell you the truth, it was mostly me that kind of put the band together. And I was playing with an upright bass at the time, which is always, you know, kind of a cool mix, the extremes of the,
Exactly.
you know, the sonic spectrum. But, you know, there's something about that too, where it's like, I think upright bass and banjo or ukulele are a little too far away. It almost feels like they're kind of ships passing in the night. It's not like you're stepping on anybody's toes, but it's also like there's a lot missing there. And so just trying to figure out what that fill was. I mean, what's the classic one, right? It's guitar, right? You put the guitar, takes up all the mids, and there are a lot of groups you've seen that it's like, okay, ukulele kind of soloist with guitar backing. I mean, that's sort of like the structure, right? So I was like, nah, I mean, I'm not even interested in playing with a guitarist, even though it's lovely. I think I'm more interested in playing with a guitarist like Lanai style, you know, barbecue style, like just hanging out. But in terms of like making art or making music, I've seen it done. Like I've just heard guitar all the time, you know, it's like the most ubiquitous instrument out there. And so the first time I played with it was just like, there's something about those two instruments. I really think they're like almost soulmates. super crazy, right? Like reentrant tuning on the top string for the banjo too. And it's like, that's the one thing that I've really loved playing with this banjo player is it's just like, I'm learning so much, just like such a different approach to the instrument, you know? Before, you know, I play reentrant tuning and I never thought of anything melodic on the high G ever. Like never taught it, never played it, never even like visualized it, right? It was almost like a rhythmic element for me. But the second I started watching them play, I'm like, they do it all the time. That's all they do. Mm-hmm. Banjo players play every melody and they're like, can I play it like, I don't know, 90% in this chord shape? Because that's what I'm going to do, right? and it sounds beautiful and it's almost effortless. Except, you know, it's really heavy right-handed, right? You got to learn a lot of right-hand technique. You got to get really smooth. But it was pretty crazy because the second it's almost like a conceptual switch that you make where you start to see melody crisscrossing across the A string and the G string. And it's like, oh my God, this is so much easier. You know, in a lot of ways, it really, really makes sense. So, yeah, I think we were talking about the Asian vibe, though, because I never even finished that story. He worked for a while in Japan, and so super obsessed with the culture and a lot of the mythology there. That tune is actually about kind of Japanese mythology of senocide, which is like basically killing old people when they're ready to die and they ask you, then you like take them out into the woods and like leave them there. So Oba-chan means grandmother, and there's like this mountain somewhere in Japan that, you know, legend tells of people taking their grandma out there and like leaving them. But the cool part is like, you know, of course, Japanese grandmother all the way to the end, she's like breaking twigs and throwing them over her shoulder so he can find his way home. So it's dark was the right word for it. But it's, you know, it's an interesting mix. And I think that like, if I am going to take time away from my job, I guess, you know, like teaching and making money, or my family, it's gotta be different for me. It's gotta be interesting. And that's the instant I like heard banjo and uke together. I was like, well, I've never heard that before. And it's really cool. It's really cool. It's like, you know, we don't play with a drummer either. And so it's almost like we're all the rhythm section, and it's such an intricate dance trying not to like step on people's toes. And it's really, really cool. And it's also a different thing too, because it's such a different power dynamic too. Banjo is just it's a cannon, right? Like
yeah,
those.
I was going to ask about that. Do you ever struggle with dynamics?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, I think in the rehearsal setting, I don't, because we're like close, right? Well, obviously not with COVID. I think we had our first rehearsal. We've had 2 rehearsals since like in the last couple of weeks, so it's been really good. But yeah, I struggle with it all the time. I was on a kick for a while there. It's like, I'm going to find a luthier to build me like the loudest ukulele possible. Like, I'm like, can you do it with a baritone body? Can you like restrain? I want a baritone that's tuned this way. I don't want that like crazy high tension. I don't want to break necks when I'm doing it. But it's like, I just needed a louder instrument. I think the loudest one I've heard is probably a Blackbird, but I don't know. Nobody wanted to go on that road with me. I think I asked Joe too. I was like, hey man, this is what I want to do. I want to like prototype. But I think asking a luthier to build a new instrument is like walking into a machine shop and being like, okay, none of this is right. Like, build me something completely different, you know, and like basically retool your whole shop to do it. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, I would say that more than anything is it's just a lot of fun, because it's like, it almost made me excited about music again, because it's just like so different, you know? I love that when that happens in playing too. It's just like new tuning, new instrument, something that just like really kind of gets those creative juices flowing again, which is really cool.
So important.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for listening.
Oh, of course. Yeah. My pleasure. It sounded great. I found your Bandcamp, which is cool. Is that a good way for people to listen to the music?
It's one of those things where we're sort of in this really interesting phase where we're making stuff that's cool enough that I'm like, oh yeah, I'd share this. I want people to hear this. But also it's like, you know, just like anything else, it requires time and effort, and like, got to build a website, got to do this, got to play shows, So yeah, there's a whole dynamic there. But yeah, Bandcamp is the best place to check it out. We're on Spotify now. We actually have 2 new cuts. I'll forward those over to you. 2 new songs that just haven't been released yet, because I have to make the artwork, you know? It's like, I got to learn how to do Photoshop and all that stuff.
After our conversation, John sent over a couple of new council tracks to share with you folks. This one is called Soul Matron, featuring John Nash on the ukulele.
Thicket and thorn spores lightly drift above the cobblestone. From these ruins or I'm sometimes it suits a solitary soul. From a soul matron come away to rhythms through tears and toil, tattered abstractions to dying minds. With an animist eye, she tries to see our band of fading forms. Sees clearly by inhaling strange vapors through tears and toil and tattered abstractions to dying minds. Sink deep below ground. Lost without a Leo sprays to reach or past the soiled plain. These seeds sink deep below ground. Lost without a Leo sprays to reach or past the soiled plain. Seeds sink deep. Every troublesome breath she sighs as the sickness takes its toll. A lone seraphim lights a fire of charity and dawns. It's exhaling strange vapors through tears and toil, tattered abstractions to dying minds. Seeds sink deep below ground. Lost without a Leo sprays to reach or past the soiled plain. These seeds sink deep below ground. Lost without a Leo sprays to reach or past the soiled plain. Seeds sink deep.
Yeah, do you have any interest in trying to make like live playing like more of your thing, or
As far as gigging goes?
Yeah, gigging. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the fire.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's hard here. I've consciously made a decision to be in the country,
yes,
in a beautiful location where I can have space around me and,
for sure,
take advantage of that. But that's also totally detrimental to my music career.
Yeah,
that's sort of, with that decision, I sort of kiss a lot of opportunities goodbye.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm a quiet guy. I don't like hustling gigs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of the gigs that can be had are like at the hotels, and you
gotta hustle.
You gotta hustle, and you're up against Sonny Lim and Cunha Goldera and all these heavy hitter Hawaiian guys who make a living playing music. And if I can just stay in my pajamas and work on the website all day and make that work, that's sort of, to me, that's the trade-off. That's my musical outlet more so than the gigging. Yeah. But I also get to farm and be outside all day.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's really good. Are you feeling a little bit of a push to kind of create something, like new project, new music? Have you?
Yeah.
I know you say you haven't touched your uke in a little bit, but it's like.
Well, I mean, I've been playing. It's just it hasn't been like super inspiring.
Yeah.
Times I think it's going to come out down the pipe. But that's for me. That's music is like everything takes a couple of years to boil down.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really want to do a Hawaiian album, cool. a good Hawaiian album. But it's such. I'm only going to get one chance to do it.
Yeah.
And I want it to really kick butt.
Yeah, totally.
And be something remarkable and interesting.
Yeah.
And just threading that needle and being, paying respects to that background of Hawaiian music that I have, but I'm also the Haole guy.
Yeah.
But also being kind of innovative I'm struggling with seeing how that's going to happen.
Totally.
And it feels very scary to get started. But I think it's going to be, like, I was inspired actually listening to your stuff.
Cool.
The new stuff, just in seeing, like, that EP approach or the single approach. It's like, it doesn't have to be a whole album. That feels so huge.
It is. It's a monstrosity. I mean, there's, and people have found ways around it, right? Like the whole Kickstarter, you're paying me before, you're buying my album before I've recorded one thing, and it's like, some of these songs haven't even written yet, and you're buying this album, that whole approach, I mean, good on people for being creative and innovative, for like figuring out how to fund things. That's awesome. But it's also like, it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge undertaking if you want to do it right.
Yeah, I mean, I have the stuff.
Yeah.
I could do it myself. I did do it myself. If only I did all that.
Yeah.
But it was like, it's such a big
It's
project.
huge.
You're going to spend months and months and months mixing and working.
Yeah. Or you're going to pay somebody else to do that. Like,
which I'm probably not.
That's the other route you can go.
Yeah.
But I mean, for us, it's sort of like that. It just makes way more sense. It's like, release a song.
Yeah.
Record one song and do it, because
it's
such a more digestible project, And I think it's almost necessary for where we're at too, because it's like we are learning a new recording at home kind of thing, working with the sound engineer, like getting our tracks in the right format. All of that stuff is it's a whole learning process. So it's so great that you don't have this whole album where 6 of the songs are garbage because you did it wrong.
Right. How has that been, working with an engineer?
It's been really cool, actually. His name is Brian. He's awesome. He's a really, really great sound engineer. And what I really like about him too is he kind of gets that we're doing something different. I mean, he engineers in Colorado, so what he's recording is mostly like, amateur. I want to record something, and it's the only album I'll ever record, and it's like these covers and one of my original songs. And so it's a lot of those projects because, he works at a place called Swallow Hill, or it's like bluegrass bands, right? And so I have a feeling, I don't want to speak for him, but I have a feeling that he's kind of like, oh, I've never heard this. And to an engineer who probably does the same thing all the time, that's got to feel refreshing. If you do that day in and day out, years and years, and you're hearing the same music over and over again, it's got to get a little old. So I think that he digs the freshness of it, and also there's a little bit of a sensibility there. I can tell he's like a rocker. Like that's the one thing I would say is like, people ask me, like, how do you describe this music? And I'm like, I don't know, like old people metal, like old people rock. I don't know. It's like all acoustic prog rock. That's kind of how I view it, because all three of us as bands were like into bands like Tool growing up and Rage Against the Machine, you know, just like really heavy stuff. I just got in this band Polyphia lately. Have you heard this band?
I haven't.
You got to check out Polyphia. They're insanity.
Polyphia.
But I remember that same feeling of like, you know, kind of being younger and on the edge. But I'm like, but I can't plug my guitar in and like full distortion. Like I can't do that anymore. Like,
okay, so that's interesting because
Yeah.
I do come from kind of a similar background where, well, sort of, because I grew up playing Hawaiian music and learning Hawaiian music, and that's what I played.
Yeah.
But like listening interests were more like heavy rock and Tool.
You're from
Rage
Cali,
Against the
right?
Machine.
Like,
yeah, it's like I think it's in the water.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like you can't do certain things or that you're totally missing out playing the ukulele? Does any of that translate?
All the time. All the time.
Because I find that that's frustrating. It's this is such amazing music. This really speaks to me, but I can't capture.
I can't do it.
Barely any of it.
Yeah, I think that there's I would probably say that like artistically, you know, like there are sort of those two sides to me, the professional and the teaching side, and then the actual like musician and artist side. Like the journey I've been on that is all about that. It's kind of like, what am I like? What do I do with this? Because that's the one thing dropping into Colorado, right? Like you can go to bluegrass jams all the time. I've been to one or two, and I've played, you know, I've tried to shred on my uke or whatever, but it's just like, it's just kind of not made for that scene. It's like, it's somebody showing up in the total wrong clothes, you know? It's sort of like, I mean, it was cool. It was super fun, but it's also like, I don't vibe with that music so much. And I'm definitely don't vibe in the same way with Hawaiian music. I love it. It's awesome. And I know that there's a tradition there that I totally respect and can really appreciate, but I don't vibe with it, you know? I'm not Hawaiian. I'm not from here. And so it's like playing an instrument that's so wedded to that scene and that culture it's been a really interesting journey. It's just been really interesting to try and like wrap my head around trying to do something that's different and really engaging for myself. But at the same time, like dealing with like the real limitations of this instrument, right? There are some real limits on it. It's like
major
chokehold, right? Sustain, volume, all of those things. And like plugged in ukulele sound, like what's that? Like there are, and I think that's really what I've found most inspiring with working with these guys in the last, 2 or 3 years has just been sort of like, oh, this is like so different. This is such different terrain for a ukulele to be in, which is like part of a band in such a different setting, right? Like you've seen ukuleles in a band, but you've never really seen a ukulele in a band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Exactly. It does. Yeah.
It's like you've seen 3 guys, like a guitarist and a bassist and a ukulele player, and there's definitely a ukulele in that band, but it's not like as a part of a sonic landscape. It's carving out its own niche, you know?
Part of the landscape.
And that's been the funnest thing, like playing with an upright bassist and a banjo player, is it's kind of like, whoa, this is something I've never even been a part of. And I love it because there's just no blueprints, you know? Like I remember I sort of grew up in my teens and 20s playing bass in a band, and there's just so many formulas and so many things that you can look at to go, how do I do this? How do I play bass? Like, what's my role? How do I fit in? Oh, this band does it like this. This dude does it like this. But it's like, what I'm doing right now with these guys, I'm kind of like, I can't look to anybody and be like, well, how do they do it? Mm-hmm. Like, what are the choices they make, you know? It's just, it feels sometimes when we're all playing together, it's almost like we're trying to put a puzzle together. Like, how do the pieces fit? Rather than like, oh, what's my part? Like, I'll play lead while you're playing rhythm, and that just never really happens. It's kind of like, okay, you're doing that crazy thing, like where's the holes, where do I fit, or you're kind of light and ethereal, I'll be more grounded and rooted and rhythmic, you know? It's like, it's more like you're kind of trying to play with these elements like that, rather than just be like, what are the chords, I'll solo now, you know? That just doesn't happen. It's really interesting, and again, nice to find somebody to kind of like talk to about it, because it's almost like that in itself is a little bit isolating as well, especially recording at home, you know? Mm-hmm. It's so different now not being able to be in a room where it's like you just get a part, you put headphones on, and you're like, I think this fits. Okay, I'll record it. And I think that's what's really cool about working with a sound engineer too. We really feel like he's kind of like a fourth member of the band, because a lot of the tunes that you heard and the 2 tunes that, we're about to release, it's like, they didn't sound like that when we sent it to them. So yeah, it's really cool, because it's almost like, well, what's it going to sound like? You know, I think we've given away that necessity to be able to reproduce something live and say it's got to sound like what it sounded like when we wrote it, because now it's like we're getting into territory where it's like, well, we didn't write that together. Like we wrote that in 3 different places on 3 different computers on 3 different instruments, you know? So it's really, it's a fun process for sure.
Awesome. Well, you want to leave us with another tune? You want to play an instrumental?
Oh God, I'd have to think. Let me dig deep. Let me dig deep.
Because we didn't even talk about Moment.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But I remember I was quite impressed with your playing chops.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you so much, man.
They were there, or you had a really good feel, and not everybody gets that. They might have the chops, but they're not in the music in that way that's so involved.
Thanks. Yeah. What was really interesting is like you were kind of talking about that single release and all that stuff. That was basically like an album that felt like a single, you know? And one of the reasons I named that album that, this is just a moment. Like this is a snapshot into like where I'm at right now. I've been spending far too much time trying to learn how to play ukulele. I mean, basically it was like after maybe 8 months of being unemployed and like 4-6 hour sessions, just like playing, like laying on my back because I couldn't sit anymore, kind of thing.
Wow.
But just trying to learn I was watching Clay Gummia videos, trying to figure out how to play that crazy song he filmed on John Yamamoto's channel.
Oh, High Sessions?
Yeah. Just some high sessions. Probably, if it was like a CD, I would have like worn grooves in it, or a record, I would have like worn grooves into it. It's like just watching that video over and over again, just trying to figure out what he's doing and experimenting everything I could, because it's not like I could ask him, or it's not like the video was clear enough that I could figure it out. Or maybe my head wasn't clear enough that I could figure it out, right? Like it'd be such a different experience to try and take that on now. But yeah, just lots of that, right? Like a lot. I mean, almost every one of those tunes was basically just like an echo of something else that I was trying to figure out how to do. One of those tunes was me trying to figure out how James Hill was doing one of his like the little TikTok with the right hand. What's that called? You know what I'm talking about?
Like the boom chick thing he does?
Yeah, the boom chick things he does. And it was like a bird or something where he's doing you know what I'm talking about? Like he's tapping on the board and stuff. And I was just watching that video over and over again and basically like wrote a lick out of it and turned that thing into a song. So every one of those almost feels like just like a regurgitation or like a filter of something else that I had heard.
Interesting.
But what's really funny too is it's like almost like that put me on the path to like, I'm never going to stop playing this instrument because I just devoted so much time to it. More than I ever had in any other instrument, right? Like I can play bass, I can play guitar, but never really dug deep the same way I did with this instrument. And I think like we kind of like made a connection there, and it was like, okay, well, I guess we're stuck together forever. Yeah. But it's also one of those things. It's like you put music out into the world and then it's on to the next thing, right? It's like, what do I do? What do I do now? Because I really do think that there is something very gratifying about the process of that, of like being like, okay, going to record something, this song is finished. And again, the instrumental chops, they might not even be there anymore because of all the stuff I've been doing in this band. It's just such a different role, a lot more singing, a lot more harmonies and stuff. And it's just like, it's just a muscle that I haven't really worked out in a long time, right? Wow. Like he's trying to say like, get those chops back. And it's like, I don't know if they're there anymore.
Is the album still available?
It is. It's probably on Bandcamp. Yeah, okay. It's probably on Bandcamp. And I would say this is like any listeners out there who are looking for a way to support musicians. It's the best way to do it, right? It's like
Bandcamp.
They have an incredible platform. I mean, they're still doing that. Like, we're not taking any cut of this. Like, all the money goes to you.
Yeah.
So if you ever see, any friends who are in, writing original music in bands or anything like that, and they're trying to sell their stuff on Bandcamp on a Friday, it's probably because they're going to get all that money. So if you ever want to like support them in the best way, just do it like that. Go buy their album, $10. I think it goes a long way, but it also is. I personally think that like keeping that contractual agreement alive for musicians, like putting value to it.
Absolutely.
Because like, what's $10?
Yeah,
$10 is nothing. And like
these days.
it means so much to somebody who's put like a lot of love, sweat, tears into a single or into an album. It means the world to somebody. It might not be putting diapers on a kid, but it just means a lot. So yeah, if you ever want to support people, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Bandcamp.
Bandcamp.
I hadn't thought about an original.
I just naturally assumed that because you did the album that was sort of your jam, was the instrumental.
I just don't do it anymore. I mean, it's funny because that conversation kind of came up. Like, it's impossibly hard to carry an hour of music by yourself on stage with a ukulele, and then you're not allowed to sing either, right? Like, it's insane. It's insane. Rough. There's like one or two people in the world who can do it, and I really think that's really speaking to the limitations of the instrument. You know, it really is. Like, I've definitely watched a person poke around on a laptop for an hour and just think about the sonic like range they have on a computer, being able to, you know, create all these kinds of sounds. And the ukulele is really limited in that. And so, yeah, I don't really do the instrumental run anymore. It's not my bag anymore. And it's also kind of like, there's people who do it so much better. Like, why am I gonna go down that road? You know? Like, and it was just it's a different time in your life too, right? Like, I think there's something about being young that makes you want to be technical. Mm-hmm. It makes you want to get chops. You're like, oh, if I could play that fast. Oh, if I could strum that fast. And it's kind of like, you get older and you're like, yeah, that's not what it's about.
Yeah. Chill out.
Chill out. That's so not what it's about. And you hear it all the time, right? Like, a lot of the older cats in the ukulele scene, they're saying that about the young kids. They're like, you don't have to play that fast.
Yeah. Give them 10 years.
Yeah, give them 10 years. But it's also like, it's kind of like, what's really funny about it is it's like, you felt that way, right? You felt like this instrument isn't powerful enough. And I think that's the one thing that I've really started to like dig with this band is I'm like, oh, I can do it. Like, you just put two more people in the room, you get a little bit more energy, and it's like, oh my God, now I can kind of rock on this thing, which has been really fun. It's a whole lot of fun for sure.
Well, thanks so much for joining me, John.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Best place for people to find you is ukuleleinspired.com.
That's right, ukuleleinspired.com if you want to check out some different music. Ukulele, banjo, and upright bass. You can find it on Bandcamp. The band is called The Council.
Nice. And the old album, which is...
That's right. Moment from John Nash. You'll probably find that on Bandcamp if you're looking for a young person trying to be technical on the ukulele.
I really liked it.
Yeah,
I thought it was very tasteful and well done.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And I was so glad you reached out and sent the CD. It was very, very enjoyable to listen to.
It was kind of interesting at that like kind of phase, right? It's just like there's these little islands of ukulele content and information, and you know, it's kind of like you're like separated by this ocean of like all the other stuff in the world. And so I think I sent that out to you were one of a handful of people that I sent that out to. I may have sent it to some players that I really respected and probably ripped off. A lot of players that I probably ripped off. It's just like Easter egg, like what's your track? I was gonna say that too. If you want to support local music, digital is the way to do it. So websites like, don't just stream them on Spotify because they don't see it. They don't see any of that money.
Yeah, that's not a good source of revenue for an artist.
Not at all.
At all. All right, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your trip. And
I will. Thanks so much, Brad. It's been awesome and very rejuvenating to be up here. I love your place.
Glad to hear it.
All right, take care, man.
Yeah. Support your local musicians and instructors, or even just the ones you enjoy online. It's really tough to make the dots meet up these days, and they would appreciate your support in any way you want to send it. If you want to find more about John Nash's music, you can find him on Bandcamp under The Council or just John Nash. He also can be found on his ukulele teaching website, ukuleleinspired.com, where you can find out more about his private lessons and workshops. If you want to support what I'm doing here on the podcast, the best way to do that would be to head over to liveukulele.com, copy that link, and post it up to your social medias or your website or anywhere you have a platform. Spread the word. And if a more financial contribution is your speed, check out some of my ebooks or my new online video course called Sixth Sense. It's a great way for you to get some awesome ukulele instructional content and for me to continue paying my bills, support the time that I put into this podcast, keep the whole show rolling. Thank you so much. The Live Ukulele podcast is published on the first and third Saturdays of every month. We'll be back here in, July already. Gosh, it's just like last year it was 2020. Oh my. Anyways, I hope you're all well out there. Take care of one another and keep playing your ukuleles. And yeah, be in touch if I can provide any assistance for you or if you have any comments, feedback on the podcast. I'll see you in the next episode. Brad Bordessa signing out. Aloha.